gun grab or gun control, and a rough ride for Randy. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
It's gun control with a twist. The Trudeau Liberals are adding hundreds of firearms to a list of so-called assault-style weapons. Those firearms are now prohibited, although the Liberals are giving the owners of these firearms an amnesty period that runs until the end of October of next year. At that time, those firearms will be part of the government's yet-to-be-launched gun buyback program that has already cost $67 million without buying back a single gun. The Public Safety Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, made the announcement on the eve of today's 35th anniversary of the mass shooting at École Polytechnique in Montreal.
Today, the government is adding a further 324 unique makes and models of assault-style firearms to the list of prohibited firearms in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. This means these firearms can no longer be legally used, sold, or imported in Canada, and can only be transferred or transported under extremely limited circumstances.
When asked to provide a list of the now banned firearms, given that they were banned as of yesterday, the minister could provide no such list. A list has since been posted to a government website. But LeBlanc still couldn't tell news reporters when this oft-delayed gun buyback program will begin.
Phase one, as you know, is to collect from the inventory of gun stores, of gun dealers. These are guns that they lawfully purchased for sale before they were prohibited. So the government will, I expect in the coming days, literally in the coming days, I hope by next week, all of these gun stores will receive information on how they can register online in terms of what inventory they have. And then those guns will be collected and they'll be compensated. But Jean-Yves or Deputy Commissioner Larkin, I've seen photos of the first guns that have been destroyed as part of a pilot project, as Jean-Yves said, with 4 businesses. This was to test the IT, the website. Those tests, I'm told, have gone well. So every other business that has these firearms in their inventory in the coming days, and not weeks, but days, will be eligible to begin to return them for compensation.
After the mass shootings in Portapique, Nova Scotia, the federal government announced a ban on 1,500 so-called assault-style firearms. This builds on that list, and the government says more firearms could be banned next year. And here's the twist. Some of these firearms might not be destroyed at all. The Liberals say they might send some of them to Ukraine to help Ukrainian forces fight the Russians. That's the government's attempt to show these weapons are not hunting rifles, but rather that they belong on a battlefield. Here's the Minister of Defense, Bill Blair.
The Ukraine security forces have been very clear about the resources, support, and equipment that they need most. And we have always listened to them and tailored our donations to best meet those needs. And just this past October, we reached out to the Ukrainians once again to see whether any of the weapons that are currently under amnesty through Canada's Assault-Style Firearms Compensation Program could be of any use to them in their fight against Russia. And they confirmed that indeed, some of the weapons that are part of the program would be suitable. And so I'm pleased today in joining in this announcement to announce also that the Department of National Defense will begin working with the Canadian companies that have weapons that Ukraine needs and which are already eligible for the Assault-Style Firearm Compensation Program in order to get these weapons out of Canada and into the hands of the Ukrainians.
As with previously announced gun control measures from the Liberals, there is sure to be opposition. Critics have said the Liberal approach is wrong, that it punishes hunters and other legal firearms owners and ignores the more serious issues of illegal guns used to commit crimes and gun smuggling from the United States. In other political news, Randy Boissonnault had a bad day yesterday. The scandal-plagued former Liberal cabinet minister was a witness at the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, asked to explain his past claims of Indigenous identity. During his testimony, Boissonnault said he was the person who came up with the term non-status adopted Cree to explain his heritage. He said he came up with that after a conversation with an Indigenous researcher. He then apologized for any confusion.
This term ensured that I claimed no Indigenous status for myself, while also honoring the Indigenous heritage of the family who adopted and raised me. During the pandemic, my family delved further into our history, which led to my adoptive mother and brother becoming Métis citizens earlier this year. Further revelations have come to light through the media since October, which was as much a surprise to me as it was to Canadians. It has been a difficult time to see our family's history be challenged publicly, and I recognize the ways in which I described my heritage have not always been as accurate as they could have been.
It wasn't good enough, though, for NDP MP Lori Idlout. She is Inuk and pressed Boissonnault to explain which Cree nation his family belonged to. Boissonnault had no answer. Here is that exchange through a translator.
What Cree nation does your family belong to?
Thanks very much, Ms. Idlout, and I really appreciate your question and your repeating it. I grew up understanding that my grandmother was Cree, and I didn't question my family about which nation, which place. It was the family, our story.
Idlout then took Boissonnault to task for pretendianism and asked him to explain how he plans to repair the damage that he has done. This again through a translator.
How are you repairing the pain and suffering you have caused to Canada's Indigenous people? How will you be repairing this to the Indigenous peoples?
Well, I hope that I have started by apologizing for using a term that was not as clear as I could have been, and I will seek advice on, as you've said, on how to make amends and to listen to the harms of people who seek false Indigenous status and Indigenous heritage, which I have not done and I won't do. And I will be very, very clear. I've apologized, and I hope that allows us to build from here.
The National Post was the first to report that a company Boissonnault co-founded described itself as wholly Indigenous owned, so it could apply for government contracts set aside for legitimate Indigenous businesses, although that firm was not successful in any of those bids. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
With our expert in communications, crisis communications, political communications, branding, and leadership with us every week is Barry McLoughlin, the president of TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. Barry lectures at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa and at the MBA program at the Shannon School of Business at Cape Breton University. Welcome back. Good to hear from you.
Great to hear from you, Rob.
I've been wanting to ask you this for quite some time as someone who has talked in the past about the advice you offered to the Mulroney government from time to time. Mr. Mulroney, let's face it, was not very well liked at the end of his time as prime minister, maybe to put it mildly. How would you compare the level of dislike for Mr. Trudeau right now to those final days of Mr. Mulroney's time in office? Mr. Mulroney, of course, had the wisdom to leave on his own terms, but how would you compare them, Barry?
I think there are similarities and differences. One similarity is each had a major tax that they imposed that was hugely unpopular. So obviously the GST is what I'm talking about for Brian Mulroney, and you remember Preston Manning called that the Mulroney tax, So it was very unpopular. I'm going to talk about that in my speech this afternoon, actually. And secondly, there is Justin Trudeau with the carbon tax, hugely unpopular. There isn't a Liberal leader in the country that endorses it now, just him. So that's a real problem. To be fair, the difference is that Mulroney left a year early. Like, he was elected in 88, and he had until 92 if he wanted to. He had a majority government, but he left in 91. And I think that no, he didn't actually. No, I got that wrong. No, he did not. He actually did his full term. In fact, it did give Kim Campbell a very, very short timeline to make an impact and connect with Canadians. So I think that you are right to raise that in their final year. Everything accumulates by then, and both of them have ended up in a very negative situation.
Okay, so you mentioned some of the differences. So what are some of the similarities? What are some of the differences then, Barry?
Well, I think the differences were that there was a different landscape. It was really the Reform Party ate heavily into traditional conservative numbers. I mean, those numbers would have, if the Reform Party and Preston Manning, they came out of nowhere, and they just absolutely like a rocket. And then, of course, the Bloc came forward in a very strong way. So he was surrounded with different parties that ate into Quebec. He was huge in Quebec. The conservative support in Quebec was huge. And that ate totally into it. And the West handed over to the Reform. So it wasn't so much that everybody hated him and had one compelling alternative. Not really. And so I think that you got to keep in mind that this landscape is different. I mean, this is boiling down to two major parties because of the kind of somewhat gentle implosion of the NDP vote, that you've got really two alternatives here. And that's a different landscape by definition.
Okay, I just, for Mr. Mulroney to leave, you don't hear anything from the current prime minister that he is in any way considering doing the same. And a lot of us are wondering, is he setting up, either himself for an epic defeat, or if he does take a walk in the snow, there is snow in Ottawa now, if he does take a walk in the snow, whether the next Liberal leader is destined to the same fate as Kim Campbell. What would you say?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't really see an option for Justin Trudeau to be reelected Prime Minister of Canada. Minority, no. It's not even going to happen. So his question is, does he leave with grace and dignity? Does he leave a winner? 3 times elected prime minister? Does he leave that way, or does he leave when the voters hand him,
they tell him to leave, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the thing. One complication that's just happened, of course, is the threatened tariff on January 20th. I think that changes the timeline. I thought over Christmas he will decide to. I've talked with my family. I've decided, throw open a race. I'm going to step down and we'll have an open race. That seemed to make sense then. But this tariff, he has to be in the driver's seat actively on January 20th, in case Trump goes ahead with that. If he doesn't go ahead with it, actually, he can turn around on January 21st and say, you know what? We did what we said we would do. We have avoided having those tariffs, and it's a good way for him to leave. Yeah.
Okay. When we come back, we have a few more things to talk about. Premiers going on Fox News. I'd like to get your take on that. And Jagmeet Singh and the mysterious Maserati. I want to talk to you about that as well. The NDP leader spotted in a Maserati SUV on Parliament Hill last week. Barry McLoughlin is with us here. With us every Friday from TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now you know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
We're back with Barry McLoughlin from TLC Transformational Leadership Consultants. What did you think of the decisions, Barry, by Premiers Ford and Smith to make appearances on Fox? Premier Ford was on Fox News, Premier Smith on Fox Business News, outlining their case against Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, it was a gutsy and unusual move. Normally, premiers don't do that, right? Especially when there's a major Canada-U.S. issue. But you know what? If we're going to say Team Canada, I guess we have to kind of live that. I mean, the premiers are not mutes just sitting there watching things, especially Premiers Smith and Ford have their own views on things. I watched the Doug Ford interview, and he did a very good job. He has that schmoozy, very American-oriented, funny enough, way of speaking, because he does a lot of business in there, or certainly his company had over the years. So he's very familiar with that. He knows the kind of sweet spots to hit. He did a very good job of that. reassuring, had the numbers available to him crisply of the importance of the trade relationship. It's a win-win for both. He really emphasized that. And he had he had a humorous kind of thing to take care of that awkward little thing of Trump saying to Trudeau, you ought to be our 51st state. And he came back and said, well, I think he's still upset over us bombing the White House in 1812. So, I mean, that was a nice thing. The host laughed. I mean, I think it was he handled that very, very well. Obviously, Danielle Smith, she has the issue of, oil and gas expert. It's huge. It's such a huge issue in the Midwest and Western United States in particular that, she needed to be heard from. And I heard that she did a decent job of that. She's got to fight for Alberta, that's for sure. Alberta will be very hard hit with a 25% tariff. And so I think that all in all, this is Team Canada working.
Good. Okay. Let's talk about the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Spotted in a Maserati SUV, luxurious Italian-made SUV. Spotted on Parliament Hill this week. Pierre Poilievre called him the Maserati Marxist. How they come up with these things, the Maserati Marxist. But then he faced questions about it from a member of the press gallery. So let's listen to a little bit of this here.
Mr. Singh, can I ask you, the Conservatives are criticizing you for driving a Maserati. Is that your car?
No.
And what do you make of their criticism?
The Conservatives are silly. They do silly things all the time. They lie all the time. They don't care about the truth. They know that they're lying and they'll do it anyways. What I'm concerned is about people getting relief. What Pierre Poilievre is concerned about is playing games in the House. And one of the things that No, not at all. It's not mine at all. It's someone else's. So what has become very clear is that the Conservatives would love to...
Okay. I think he was caught off guard, Barry, by that line of questioning. He offers this denial. There's even some nervous laughter in there. Look, reporters on Parliament Hill, they have a lot of sources, and they can find out pretty easily, I think, who owns that car.
Yeah,
but I guess, how does it look to have the NDP leader being carried around in a $120,000 car?
It's not a good look, and Jagmeet Singh is no fool. He knows it's not a good look. Okay, so what does he do? He doesn't really make a statement. He decides to, as he's going after Poilievre, he does a bunch of hitbacks. No, not mine, not at all, not mine. It's just a friend. He never gives you a coherent statement, with this. He could have taken his time, say, what am I going to say about this? Have a very brief couple of sentences and move on. He better be telling the truth. I can't believe he would tell a lie about that. I would be amazed if he stood there, bald-faced, and told a lie. I can't imagine he did that. But boy, if he did, that becomes way too much of an issue. We call that breaking into jail. You're going to break into jail on that one. So yes. I think also it's always been a sensitive issue. We do know, at least a lot of people know, he's from a wealthy family. He's a wealthy guy. Those are, $3,000 suits apparently, So he, it's hard to be the worker's voice when these become the flashpoints. These become things that people notice. It's not a horrible thing, but, if you do it, own up. Listen, a friend of mine, spend a sentence or two and tell us what you were doing there. But I thought that was mishandled by definition.
Okay. All right. Got to wrap it up there, Barry. Good to hear from you. Barry McLoughlin from TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. Back with Tom Korski from Blacklock's Reporter right after the news. Here on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
Well, he's been minding Ottawa's business all week long. Tom Korski is back with us. Tom is the managing editor of Blacklock's Reporter. Great to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Rob.
What do you think the chances are, Tom, that the public accounts, the annual balance sheet for the government, will be released and there will be a fall economic statement before the House of Commons breaks for Christmas?
Fall economic statement, that's the mini budget they usually come out with in November. That's looking pretty shaky. The public accounts, if they don't table the public accounts by New Year's Eve, you might as well burn the Department of Finance to the ground. That's a legal requirement. That's an act of Parliament. It's the law. You must publish those accounts by the end of the year. why do MPs and senators start to get excited in December when they haven't seen the public accounts? As you mentioned, Rob, it's the only document, the only one anywhere, that tells you where the government has spent money in the last budget year. It's the only place where you, as a taxpayer or your representative in the Senate or the House of Commons, can find out where the money went. And I mean, it covers everything from loan guarantees to payments involving fender benders with RCMP patrol cars. It covers the waterfront, and there's usually damning material in public accounts, which is why governments don't like to release them and wouldn't if they had a choice. Luckily, they don't.
Okay. These delays, have you ever seen anything like this during your years of covering Parliament Hill?
It has become more common under this cabinet.
Okay.
In 2020, you recall, they didn't even have a budget. I've never gotten over that. Every county, school board, every little municipality had to have a budget in 2020, the pandemic year. The Department of Finance didn't have a main budget. In 2021, they pushed the public accounts all the way down to the 14th of December. And you say, well, it was COVID. We were wearing masks, Rob. It was a crazy time. No. The year before the pandemic, they pushed the public accounts down to December 12th. Usually, the government of Saskatchewan releases its public accounts in the summertime. Most people don't find this difficult, but I guess Cabinet has a lot to hide. And so help me, if they could table this till the 12th of November, I think they would.
So the House is supposed to break on the 17th of December. Does the House, I hate to pin you on this, maybe you don't know, does the House need to be sitting in order for the public accounts to be released, or can they be released after the House breaks?
It should be tabled in the House of Commons, but you know what they do, Rob, and this is what they did 3 years ago. They tabled it with 36 hours left on the House calendar as MPs were packing their bags and heading for the train station. So that's the oldest trick in the book.
I see. All right. Stay tuned on that. It just makes you wonder.
Oh, it's got to be good.
Where are what are they hiding? Why aren't they releasing this stuff? Where's the fall economic statement? The clock is ticking on fall. Anyway, okay, let's move along. We are all promised a 2-month break on the GST starting in just a couple of weeks. December 14th. This is supposed to take place. Last until the middle of February. How much could Canadians save?
The food professor, Sylvain Charlebois, lead researcher on the annual food price report at Dalhousie University, testified in Senate National Finance Committee. He said he crunched the numbers. He went through actual retail sales data to work it out. And I hope you're sitting down for this one, Rob. Okay. Actual savings for a typical Canadian over the 2-month tax holiday will be $4.51. $4.51. Oh, by the way, the price of food is going up more than $800 next year. So I'm doing a rough percentage here. That would be 0.000 nothing percent of your food bill next year.
It's $4.51 for the entire 2 months.
That's it.
Wow. Holy cow.
So you can legitimately say, well, how many restaurant meals, bottles of champagne, and cartons of chocolates does the typical family buy? Apparently, Canadian families are not huge champagne drinkers, because if your savings over the 8 weeks is $4.50, it's slim pickings.
I don't know. That seems like a low figure to me. I'm not questioning the food professor. He was actually supposed to join us yesterday for an interview, but then they summoned him into this darn committee. So he couldn't join us yesterday to talk about this. I calculated it out because it was, I think their estimate was it was about $1.6 billion or something for the
total
GST holiday, right?
That's right.
And I said there are 15 million households. So on average, it works out to be $106, but it's a consumption tax, so you can't go by averages. But nevertheless, it's not a lot of money any way you look at it.
He would go through actual retail sales of, for instance, champagne chocolates. But even, you're right, the Fed's figure is about $100 for a family of four. So $4.51, I agree, seems low. Interestingly, no one has contradicted his figure, least of all the Department of Finance.
Yeah, okay. And as far as the $250 checks goes, I mean, that was the second part of that affordability package. I mean, that's all up in the air now. I'm starting to wonder if those $250 checks will ever land in bank accounts, because that is the topic of, some negotiation, I suspect, between New Democrats and Liberals right now, Tom.
And that's the $6 billion giveaway by official figures. It hasn't even been introduced, nowhere close to being passed. Parliament, as you mentioned, is about to go on Christmas holiday. They don't come back until the last week of January. They have so many problems that this $250 giveaway is the least of their troubles.
Okay. When we come back, let's imagine this. You are traveling for Christmas and you buy a ticket to ride the rails on Via Rail. How much is the government kicking in to keep Via Rail on the tracks? You won't believe the number. It's in a report that Blacklocks has read, and Tom will share it with us next. That's coming up here on Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Back with Tom Korski, the managing editor at Blacklock's Reporter, minding Ottawa's business. We have talked in the past, Tom, you and me, about the losses at Via Rail. It is losing money every day the trains are rolling. It does have a route, a tourist train called the Canadian, runs between Vancouver and Toronto. If I buy a ticket for that route, how much is taxpayers subsidizing my ride?
Over $1,000 a passenger. It's $1,015 a passenger. And Gosh. You'd say, well, that's a pretty steep subsidy. Indeed, it's a record. It's the highest subsidy on the entire line. You say, well, for that, you must be getting pretty good service. Even Via Rail says the service is terrible. On their best day, that train runs 8 hours late. They actually now are down to judging their late schedule by the calendar. And they describe delays now are at times unacceptable in their words. Over $1,000 per passenger on the entire train subsidy.
So this is in the rail line's 2024-2028 corporate plan that Blacklock's reviewed. Reliability, a major problem at Via. What's the reason behind that?
Well, they say, as they always have, that they have a couple of problems. One is they don't own the line. Canadian National owns most of the lines that they run on, and freights get the right of way because freight trains pay, and they are not subsidized by the taxpayers, and CN is not interested in helping Via Rail's dreams come true because they have shipments to deliver. But Via has said this for years. They have other problems they cannot blame on anyone else. They say, this is fascinating, they say they now operate one of the oldest commercial fleets in the world. The average age of Via Rail rolling stock, that's a passenger car, is 77 years. Predates 1947.
77 years old? That's the average age of rolling stock at Via Rail is 77 years old?
77 years, yeah. It's one of the planet's most badly run railways. But this per passenger subsidy, I'm with you, $1,015. Rob, for $1,000, I'll drive you from Vancouver to Toronto. I'll get a van, we'll pack you in. You can look out the window. We can stop for snacks. That's no problem. $1,000 a pop? Come on.
$1,000 just in the subsidy. My gosh. The trains on the entire network are late half the time.
That's their on-time performance. My favorite, though, is they redefined on-time performance.
Okay.
In Switzerland, on-time performance means you get within 3 minutes of schedule right to the station. Okay. What is it?
Right.
Germany, 6 minutes. The United States, 10 minutes. Via expanded they have their own special definition within 15 minutes of schedule. And they still have terrible on-time performance. But my favorite is when they say it's the Canadian National, it's this cruel web of circumstances. There's a train, it's a commuter train, runs from Brockville to Ottawa, a station in Ottawa, suburban station called Fallowfield Station. We did an access to information on this. This dog ran late 173 business days in a row. Sunshine, light snow, a dusting of fog. It didn't really matter. It's a distance of 98 kilometers, Rob. So you can drive that in really in the time that you have a cup of coffee in the car. 173 business days in a row. It's really
in a row. Isn't that something? Okay, so let's turn our attention. Look, when the Auditor General's report drops, it's never a good week for any government. When the Auditor General's report drops, looked into very expensive COVID relief program from the government, the CEBA loans. What was uncovered and what do MPs want to know?
Canada Emergency Business Account loans, Rob. These were interest-free loans for small business. Bizarrely, the Department of Finance assigned it to a Crown Bank that had never run such a program. The Crown Bank, Export Development Canada, told them, we don't know how to do this. We're going to have to hire a contractor. Finance Department said, that's fine. And they hired a Brazilian contractor who it was like Lucy and Ethel were running this program. They wasted billions, literally billions were paid out to ineligible borrowers. They were having a call center in Brazil that was billing taxpayers for a 14-hour workday. They never worked 14 hours. They were charging billable hours up to $750 an hour. It's like they hired Brazilian patent lawyers to answer the phones. MPs had enough. They want to know who at the Department of Finance thought this was a neat idea. Not the minister. Apparently, Minister Freeland was in a corner of her office working on the economy. Some lower-level assistant deputy genius signed off on this. MP's Public Accounts Committee, they want names, and when they get those names, there's going to be some sadness, Rob. They're going to bring those people in to ask them questions.
I suspect so. I have so many questions about this myself because Export Development Canada says, well, we couldn't do it. And I was thinking to myself, my own opinion, well, what do they do there at Export Development Canada? Well, they say, well, we extend credit. Oh, you extend credit. You mean you give loans? Who do you give loans to? Oh, we give loans to businesses. Oh, okay. What is the CEBA loan program? Oh, it's a loan program for businesses. Oh, I see.
But it's all
You're totally unqualified to do it then. All right.
All export finance. It's a very small world, though. They said a typical year, we approved 300 loans. This involved nearly 1 million loans. And then their heads exploded. Oh, the Brazilians, though. Oh, they were walking around with brandies and cigars. They just took us to the cleaners.
Imagine. How's the Canada Summer Jobs Program going? The auditor looked at that as well.
It's expensive. It costs taxpayers over $250 million a year. And the Auditor General said, so this is a job creation program. And they asked the department that runs the program, how many jobs are created? And the Department of Employment said, I don't know. And the auditor said, well, did you ask? And the Department of Employment said, no, we never did ask how many jobs are created under our jobs creation program. Could you get on that?
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Other than that, the place runs like a Swiss watch, Rob.
Yeah. It's only a $285 million program. How many jobs did you create? Good question. You know what? We actually don't keep track. Isn't that
it's only money.
Yeah. Great to hear from you. Have a great weekend, Tom Korski. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. Minding Ottawa's business, aren't you? Glad somebody is. That's Tom Korski from Blackhawks Reporter. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today it's the Friday free-for-all. And that's our favorite day of the week around here because we don't come up with the topics. We've been doing that all week long. So today it's your turn. What do you want to talk about? I want to talk about something that's been in the news. It's been a busy week in news. So go right ahead. If you want to raise something that you think should be in the news, if that's the case, go for it. Whatever happens to be on your mind. We're usually good to roll with just about anything. And on Fridays, we prefer to follow your lead. The phone lines are open right now. Number to call is 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that to Andrea, our call screener, and we will make your call a priority. Now, one of the biggest news stories, I just want to introduce this as a topic. You don't have to comment on it if you don't want to, because it's the Friday free-for-all. But one of the big news stories broke yesterday, late in the day. And I told you to expect something like this. I told you last week, watch this space and don't be surprised if the Liberals make some big announcement about gun control. And that's what they did. Because today is the 35th anniversary of that terrible night in Montreal when a gunman murdered 14 women because they were women. The man was a misogynist. He hated women. And ever since that awful night, around this time of year, the gun control debate reemerges, and here we are. Although I have to say, this announcement from the Liberals on gun control has a twist that I would like to get your take on. We talked about this last week when we debated gun control. Assault-style firearms. Government says we've already banned 1,500, and now they're going to add 324 models of these so-called assault-style firearms to that original list of more than 1,500. And they say even more firearms could be added to this list in the new year. So those firearms will now be part of the government's often promised and long delayed gun buyback program. There's an amnesty, as some of you may be aware, until October 30th of next year, even though there's probably going to be an election before that. So look, I'd really like your take on this. The twist to this, and I personally found this kind of strange. The twist is they say they're going to collect some of these firearms and send them to the Ukrainian forces so the Ukrainians can use them in their fight against the Russians. The government's contention is these firearms are not supposed to be used for hunting. They're supposed to be used on the battlefield. So look, that's the announcement in a nutshell. And I would really like your take on it. Really would today. Because you would probably know more about this than I would, because I don't own any guns and I've never been in the military. So you had a lot to say on this issue last week. Really like to know what you think about this latest move from the Trudeau Liberals, gun control, assault-style firearms, sending so-called assault-style firearms to Ukraine to help the Ukrainians fight the Russians. 1-833-668-2577. But again, it's the Friday free-for-all. Tim in Dartmouth up first on today's Talkback. Hi there, Tim. How are you?
Not too bad. Like I told you before, sending those things over to Ukraine is absolutely useless. Anybody from the infantry or any combat arms would tell you that. This is, again, people who know nothing about military weapons or firearms for that matter are trying to tell people what to do, how to do it, or whatever. You know, they've got to educate themselves. It's just ludicrous, without a doubt.
Okay, what would make these firearms not for use in battle? Why is that? Why wouldn't they be any good on a battlefield?
Okay, well, you know anything about cars? You're a car guy?
I know a thing or two about cars, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
You take a Ford Taurus out of the showroom, give it to your police department. That thing isn't going to last a month because it's not built for police purposes.
Okay.
The Ford Tauruses that the police have,
right.
Heavy duty this, heavy duty that, heavy, you know, and that's it. Plus, these weapons are not assault weapons. Assault weapons are heavy duty, and for the vast majority of them, they have a selector, single shot, 3-round burst, or a complete automatic. None of these civilian weapons have any of that.
Right.
They're not rugged. I mean, any soldier who in Ukraine would look at it and throw it away. Absolutely useless.
Okay, interesting,
Again,
interesting, Tim.
Know.
Thank you for getting us off. You've got us off to a good start there, Tim. Thank you. Let's go to Kieran in Calgary, line 2. Kieran, you're on the air. What's on your mind, Kieran? Go ahead.
This firearm, just when you thought they couldn't get less intelligent about what they're doing, it blows my mind. So 2 things.
Okay.
Last night I went through the list, and added up how
Right.
much I've spent on the banned rifles, and they'd have to write me a check for $98,000 to get them back. So that's $98,000 that
Wow.
comes out of taxpayer money for stuff that's triple locked, sitting in a safe behind a sealed door that also has a lock on it. So I don't really understand how that's worth $98,000 of our taxpayer money when it's just sitting there. Second of all, the last caller is right. They're not military firearms. They're military-looking firearms, but if you actually gave anything on that list except maybe one firearm to someone in Ukraine, they're going to throw it away and grab something else because it's just ridiculous. Like, for example, I forget her name, but I was reading it last night. She came out holding a GSG-16, which is a 22 caliber semi-automatic MP5 style looking firearm. It's plastic. It breaks at ranges all the time, just when you're shooting plinking for fun, and it shoots a 22 caliber bullet that you'd probably have to send 10 or 15 rounds into a coyote to hurt, let alone a human with modern body armor. They're going to laugh at you. And they're saying they're going to send these to Ukraine? Like, I don't.
Well, that's what
understand
they
the
say they're
logic.
going to do. Yeah, they say they're going to do that. You say it's ridiculous.
I've literally had that firearm in my hand, a friend of mine, shooting it at the range. It had 10 rounds in it, and 7 of them jammed. It's a piece of you-know-what firearm made of plastic. It'll break in a range in a controlled environment. You put it on a battlefield, it's gonna cause more damage to the person using it than the person they're trying to engage.
All right.
There is
All
a
right.
couple on there that
I mean,
are
let me circle back just a bit while I have you on the line here. $98,000. Like, how many firearms do you have?
That's 8 of them. Because when you look at
Okay.
the firearm, I'm one of those buy once, cry once people. Like, I buy the higher quality ones. But also, if you're going to be buying the firearm, you're writing me a check for the optics that I can't put on anything else, all the magazines I've purchased, any accessories or stuff that I put on that firearm to make it how I want it, that is not transferable or the right application for other firearms like bolt actions that are still legal. You've made that completely useless. So you're buying the firearms and everything that's on the firearm. So yeah, I've talked to a bunch of people. The average price, I'd say that they're going to have to give people is probably 15 to 20 grand if you have 3 or 4 of these. So you add that up.
All right.
Yeah, it's just insane.
A lot of money. A lot of money. Okay. Interesting. Thank you so much. I'm learning quite a bit here as we go along.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday free for all Talkback hour. Jay in Kitchener. Welcome to Talkback, Jay. You're on the air. What do you want to talk about?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, do they have the elections date set for 2026 yet?
2025. It'll be sometime in the third week of October.
Hopefully the mail strike will be resolved by that time because for mail-in ballots, you know.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I would suspect. I don't think they'll be on strike for a year, Jay.
Well, I'm hoping not, but yeah, you know.
I never know, I guess. Yeah. Okay, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, Jay's waiting for if you want to comment on that as well, the Canada Post strike, feel free. It's kind of become a Friday tradition around here, the longer that thing goes on. Chris in Halifax up next. You're on Talkback, Chris. What's on your mind today?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm fine, Chris. Thanks. Go ahead.
I just got a quick comment about the gun control.
Sure thing.
I'm part Indigenous. I'm part quote-unquote colonizer. I don't think a lot of people realize that Indigenous First Nations people, they don't have to follow these gun laws that are being put out by the government, which they shouldn't have to anyway. So you're going to create a population where part of the population is allowed to have these guns, and the other part of the population isn't allowed to have these guns. So I don't see where a gun ban is going to work in any way in this country, because they're always going to be up against the First Nations, and the First Nations, they're their own sovereign nation within our country, and they're not going to put up with it, and they shouldn't have to. So That's just my take on it, and I don't think.
Well, in fact, Chris, if I could just jump in there. Yeah, Chris, if I could just jump in there. In fact, when the first list of firearms was introduced, when they were trying to pass the first gun control legislation a few years ago, there was a lot of pushback from First Nations leadership who said, there's no way that we can support this legislation, and we won't support this legislation. And you may remember Carrie Price put something out on Twitter. Carrie Price is a member of a First Nation from the West Coast, avid hunter, and said, I'm not a criminal. I'm just a hunter. So they were forced to go back and make all kinds of amendments to their legislation. And, here they are again. And I'll be curious to see if they get pushback again on this. And you think they will?
I think they absolutely will. I was in a gun shop the other day in Nova Scotia, and I wanted to look at an AR-15, and I wasn't allowed to because, I'm a Canadian citizen. A fully fledged First Nations person walked in with a federal card, and they said, can I look at the AR-15? Sure, no problem. You can look at it. So when we got that division, how can the laws ever be enforced? That was my first comment. My second comment is you're talking about sending guns to Ukraine. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but a lot of the ammunition from national chains in Canada has already been taken from the national chains and has been sent to Ukraine. I won't mention what stores, but any national store that sells the ammunition. I went to buy some ammunition to go hunting, and they were out, and I said, well, where is the ammunition? And the manager of the store said a lot of that ammunition is already being sent to Ukraine. The government is forcing these national companies, and they're taking their ammunition and they're sending it to Ukraine already. So.
Okay. All right. What do you think about this idea of sending some of these firearms to Ukraine?
I think it's ridiculous because, you're dealing with guns that are made in Russia and Ukraine, which are, they're much more tougher and they're combat ready or battlefield ready guns. And the guns that we have, they're hunting rifles. To them, they're just toys. And like your other people have called in and said, they're laughable. So, they're not going to use those. That's a last resort for them. Who's going to pick up an AR-15 and use that when they're using AK-47s, which is one of the most reliable machine guns on a battlefield, right? So it's laughable that they're even thinking of doing that. So, all right.
Laughable. Okay, Chris.
All right.
Look, thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. Great to hear from you and get your perspective on the Friday Free for All Talkback Hour today. But a lot of people want to talk about the gun measures that were announced yesterday by the Trudeau Liberals, with more assault style, in quotation marks, firearms being added to the banned list, 324 more.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is Talkback. It is the Friday free-for-all, so we're wide open on topics. Certainly gun control has taken off as a topic again today. Lee in Brantford. Go ahead, Lee. You're on the air. What do you want to talk about, Lee?
Hey, Rob. I'd kind of like to talk about this from two angles. This bothers me because of, this is the way that the Liberals kind of handle problems in our society, and it also bothers me because this is how Trudeau sort of tries to get votes. And so what I mean by that is to say that the Liberals have tried to solve this gun control problem in Canada, which is getting out of hand. Like here in Ontario, you hear about stuff every day, at least every week, if not almost every day, of gun incidents, which it just wasn't the case 20 years ago. It's a real problem that needs to be fixed. But they keep doing these things that they're like, we did something, but it doesn't actually address the real problem, because addressing the real problem would kind of go against their voting base. So they just keep taking rifles away, and I guess it's a little bit annoying because this date every single year the Liberals do something stupid to buy Quebec votes. It's like clockwork, and the fact that it's so noticeable, I just find it irritating, I think. And then the other thing is Trudeau loves to wedge, and he's been looking for a wedge issue maybe he's found one, but like a wedge is by definition something that pushes people apart. And he's done that so much in this country that like there is irreparable harm that I think that's happened to our society as a result of this one man. And so like picking gun owners because they're not typically liberal voters, and then also adding in the Ukraine thing, which is a pretty polarizing topic. It's just got his fingerprints all over it, and it's just like, why can't this guy leave before he screws up anything else in our country? Like, I can't even wait for another year. Like, it's out of control.
Okay. All right. Thank you for having your say on the Friday Free for All Talkback Hour. Couple of lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. Paul in Cambridge. Hi, Paul. You're on the air. I bet you want to talk about the gun control announcement. Do you?
Of course I do.
I bet
Being
you
a
did.
legal firearms owner and knowing a fair bit about firearms, one of your previous callers was alluding to a particular rifle, a Russian SKS. The SKS was a battlefield rifle. It's a 7.62 semi-automatic, not full auto, semi-automatic that was used on the Russian battlefields. They were surplus guns. They were packed away in Cosmoline and shipped all over the world. They sold here in Canada dirt cheap a few years back. You could buy one for about $169, and they'd throw in a case of ammo with it because they were so inexpensive at that time. Now, it's one of the favorite rifles for the Indigenous community for sustenance hunting. So here you have a battlefield rifle that is perfectly suitable for hunting big game here in Canada. The SKS, a battlefield rifle, is
all right, Paul.
not
Look,
on the list.
I'll bring you back on, but you'll have to wait until after the news, and you can finish your thought, okay? But you'll have to wait, or they're just going to cut us off and play the news anyway. So we have to stop.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It is a Friday free-for-all, but a lot of people want to talk about the gun control measures announced yesterday by the Trudeau Liberals and more assault-style firearms being added to the banned list. We've been talking with Paul in Cambridge, avid gun owner, knows a lot more than me about guns. Continue, please, Paul. Go ahead for a few minutes.
Okay, as far as the Russian SKS, like I say, it's a battlefield rifle. It even comes with an attached swing-away bayonet on it. Majority of people take them off, but that's how the rifle came. They're used for hunting by the Indigenous all across Canada. This is one of the reasons why the Liberal government is not interested in touching the SKS. Even though it is a true military-style assault rifle, as they like to call them, as far as the other ones go, some time back, the Liberals banned a bunch of guns, which meant some of mine had to stay in the safe, awaiting a so-called buyback. I don't know how you can buy back something you never owned, but they say they're going to buy back this gun from me. So with last night's release, now there's another one on the list that they're going to buy back. The original program was, or the original description was a semi-automatic rifle that had a detachable magazine. There's a few other requirements on it, but it had to be center fire and a detachable magazine.
That's right.
And now they've gone to the point where they are now including a lot of 22 rifles. Now, I do own a Ruger 1022, which is a semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle. The action works exactly the same as a GSG model. I can't remember the exact model number, which is also in 22. So it gets added to this list and becomes prohibited. But my identical Ruger 1022, now I'm not saying that they should ban it, but there's no difference between them. They both use the same ammunition. They both operate in the same manner. But when you've got with the Liberals, it's never let a tragedy go to waste. So they've been, they raise this every year around this time. Back in April of 2020 when you had a mass shooting of 22 people killed. Now, I guess the Liberals don't use that one because Gabriel Wortman, the killer in the case, burned down a lot of houses as well. He had illegal firearms that he had smuggled in from the States. And when we go back to Polytech,
that's right.
The gun used in Polytech was a Ruger Mini 14 ranch rifle. At that time, that rifle, during that time period, you would purchase out just with an FAC. And then even up until May of 2020, you could walk in with your PAL and buy that rifle. It was not restricted or anything else. You just have to have your gun license to purchase it.
Yeah, well, it is
so
now.
if
Yeah.
it was
Okay.
such a terrible gun...
I got you, Paul. There are other callers waiting on the line, Paul. Gotcha, Paul. There are just other calls waiting on the line, so I will have to move along. Thank you, Paul. But thank you. I think you've made some good points there. Rob in Calgary, up next. Hi, Rob. You're on the air. Go ahead, sir, with your opinion.
Thank you very much for taking my call. It was a tragedy that the Liberal government keep looking at the gun. The guns are the tool. Let's look at the person. The person who killed all those women in Montreal was a radicalized Muslim. People are forgetting to recognize.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
Here?
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. His name was Mark Le Pen. He was an anti-feminist. He wasn't a radicalized Muslim. No, he wasn't.
Right.
Oh, he hung up on me. Okay. All right. Let's go to Steve in Halifax up next. Steve, you're up next, Steve. What's your opinion here, Steve?
Oh, hey, so I'm a new gun owner, and I've just got my license now. I have my semi-automatic rifle for protection on land I own out in the middle of nowhere in the woods in case of like a bear or coyote attack to protect myself, my family. So I find it kind of silly that I would have to give up this gun that only holds 5 rounds of 9mm, which is the smallest kind of ammo I'm pretty sure you can buy. Won't even kill a deer. It's mostly for like intimidation tactics, to scare a predator away. So I find that pretty crazy to think you're going to take this plastic gun and send it to Ukraine where a soldier is going to maybe fire 5 rounds and have it break on them. I don't even think they use 9mm guns in the Army. So,
right.
Most military style. I have been watching a lot of gun videos, and a lot of military ammo is insanely large, fires maybe 100 rounds a minute. So to take my gun that I use for protection away from me seems just totally ridiculous and useless. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Steve, for having your say. We'll stop right here. The gun control topic, it can be about anything because it's Friday. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday free for all. Talkback. Gun control, though, a hot topic today. Neil in Calgary. Hi, Neil.
Hi there, Rob.
Yes, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about something different you had earlier on the week about the border.
Yes.
So I have a bit of a different perspective than most people, I think, on the border, because I recently drove, and I have driven before, from Calgary down to through both borders, through the U.S. border and then the Mexican border.
Oh, okay.
Down into to go to a place called Hermosillo, Mexico, which is Sonora State. But just because I'm in the mining business and I have business there. So anyways, I have driven back and forth across these borders. and I did drive recently. It's quite a different border crossing into Mexico than it is crossing from Canada into the U.S. In Mexico, the Mexican border, there's a military setback from the U.S. It's around 21 kilometers, I believe.
Wow.
It's kind of a no man's land in which anything can occur in there. So typically we just drive as fast as we can through there to get to the real crossing, which is, like after this. So you go through a regular border crossing, just like you're crossing in the United States. But then there's a setback. So then you got to go this 21 kilometers before you're officially in Mexico. There you have to get your visa and all that sort of stuff so that you can actually enter Mexico. And then you go through another border crossing there. It used to be a lot more rigorous, but now they've extended what they call the free zone further into Mexico. Free zone being where they can carry on free commerce and it's not subject to the normal taxes.
Okay.
So, kind of like a GST free zone, only they call it EVA there. But anyways, companies like car companies typically produce parts in those free zones and whatnot. But anyways, it's like crossing into a war zone. You're subject, once you cross there, you're subject to search by the military, by the Mexican military, which is great. They're good guys. Then you're subject to the federal police, which aren't so great.
Okay.
They're a little more rude.
Okay.
And then you're subject to state police checkpoint. So, and my point is I don't know if the Americans, like the U.S., is expecting us to do something similar on the Canadian border.
Wow.
But it seems like a whole lot of extra border security for what I understand to be a minor amount of drugs and maybe a few people passing through the border who shouldn't have. But anyways, it is a heavily fortified border. Like it's not like your normal border crossing that we have in the U.S. So.
Right.
And then on the way
it has certainly served. I would only add that it has certainly served as kind of a wake up call, or I think a sobering moment for the Trudeau government that this is an issue of great concern to the Trump administration and I think to Canadians generally speaking.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't come to that because it's a whole lot of border friction that we honestly shouldn't have between the U.S. and Canada, which I think are fairly friendly countries towards each other. I think Mexico is very friendly to the U.S. It's just the U.S. isn't friendly to them. The 99% of Mexicans are not doing all these bad things. So, but in any event, the Mexicans or the U.S., when they cross that border and they're in that demilitarized zone or military zone, whatever you want to call it, they think they're in Mexico. So I often ask them, I says, did you have to show your passport? No. Well, you weren't really in Mexico. You were just in this 21-kilometer zone.
No man's land. Okay. Look, very interesting. I'm going to have to move along because it's very busy here. So we're going to just move along to Cambridge, Ontario. Charlie is on the line. Charlie, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, hi, Rob. Some very good calls, but why stop with the guns to Ukraine? Why don't we send them a couple of Chinook helicopters or a couple of submarines that really don't work? I'm sure they can recycle metal into something else, maybe their own ammunition, but... and doing all this
some
CF-18s.
Maybe we could send in some CF-18s or some snowbirds or something.
Rob, what I wanted to talk about was the latest Angus Reid poll that came out. A big poll, 3,003 participants. It's got a plus or minus of 1.5 percentages. This poll conservatives at 43, Liberals 20, NDP 20. Now, I got a problem with this. Why are that many gullible Canadians who like to be overtaxed, or that many gullible Canadians who think Trudeau's really got their back? Rob, maybe you can help me out. Why do so many people support the Liberals, and why if they got that much popularity yet.
Well, you know what, Charlie? It's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking about that just the other day. Why are the Liberals where they are in the polls? And I mean that. Why are they even where they are in the polls? How are they still polling 20, 23%, even say it's 24, 25% at best for the Liberals? Meaning, you know, why would 1 in 4 Canadians or 1 in 5 Canadians still support the Liberals? It's a good question. I think it all comes down to values. It's down to values right now. There are they honestly can't think that Mr. Trudeau's done a great job or that the country's really firing on all cylinders right now. I think it's purely about values, and they just don't see their values, say, reflected in either the Conservative Party of Canada or certainly Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. It's down to values, just value, plain and simple values. That's what I think it is, Charlie. We'll have to stop there. Be right back, though. It's the Friday Free for All Talkback.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
This is a Friday Free for All Talkback. Mike in Calgary. You're on the air, Mike. What's your opinion today?
Hey, I was listening to your show, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, and you were talking about Jagmeet and, you know, and asking opinions on Jagmeet and what he's done, and, you know, he wants recognition. I guess the best analogy I have for Jagmeet Singh is I feel like he's the co-captain of the Titanic, right? And Canada is obviously the ship, and, you know, Jagmeet wants to be recognized for putting life jackets on everybody. You know, I think if you stand back and look at the big picture, you know, where has the country gone in the last 8 years where he's been, you know, supporting Trudeau? And Jagmeet's like, well, I got people this, I got people that, I got people that. Well, that's okay, but let's look at all the stuff that, you know, happened to Canada during that time. And I just feel like the stuff that he's done is far, far less than the damage that he's caused over the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, for calling. Good to hear from you. Did not get a lot of uptake on people when I was asking them earlier in the week on what they thought of the performance. I mean, Mr. Singh has been the leader of the New Democrats for 7 years. And as much as people want to show Mr. Trudeau the door, that is certainly a prevailing opinion in our politics these days. Come the next election, I mean, I think Mr. Singh's job is on the line in this upcoming election. He cannot have another performance, the likes of which he has had in the last 2 elections, where you think of where Jack Layton had the big orange wave, more than 100 seats, official opposition. Thomas Mulcair comes in, the seat count gets cut in half. Mr. Singh comes in, cuts it in half again, and then barely hangs on to the seats that he has in the following election. This is going to be Mr. Singh's 3rd kick at the can. And if there's not some kind of breakthrough, you'd think there'd be a political price to pay for that. Michael in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Michael.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm fine, Michael. What's your opinion on anything today, really?
My little short story I have for you is just the handgun issue. Obviously, they want to take handguns away because they're a problem in society for people that aren't responsible with them.
Yes.
I go back about 130 years in Alberta, and we have handguns in our family that my father can't now give back down to me. He used to be able to grandfather them down to me. Some of them had very short barrels. There's prohibited weapons, so there's restricted, non-restricted, and then prohibited. So I was able to be grandfathered into some of the prohibited. And these are just family heirlooms that have been around for years. And now that I'm supposed to just hand them over, and the ones that he was going to grandfather down to me, he just hands them over if this goes through. I just want people to understand that the generations they're stories. They're not just a gun. They're part of our family. They're part of our family heritage. My father bought a handgun for my grandma for Mother's Day, and him and his uncle went out and earned the money for that handgun to give to my grandma, and now I can't have it.
Wow.
So it hurts, you know, for me really deep down for stuff like that I just
it's personal.
have to hand them over.
It's personal for you, right?
It is. Yeah. So I just want people to understand and know that there is another side of that too. That, you know, these guns might never do anything in their life, but they were gifts. They were Mother's Day gifts. They were presents. They've been around forever and generations, and I can't have them.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for letting me
sharing
share that
that.
with you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah. Wow, very quick hour. Hour number 2. Friday Free for All Talkback. We're wide open line, open topic today. Certainly gun control was the dominant topic in the first hour, but we can pick up on other issues in the second hour. Really bad unemployment report today. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about things right after the news.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
It is the Friday Free for All Talkback Hour. Welcome to hour number 2. A lot of calls on gun control in light of the government's announcement yesterday. 324 additional models of what the government calls assault-style firearms added to this list of more than 1,500 assault-style firearms. And the twist in all of it, they're going to take some of those guns and they say send them to Ukrainian forces so the Ukrainians can use them in the fight against the Russians. So if you want to weigh in on that, well, just one more topic, and I would just to throw out there as a topic of conversation. Goodness me, ugly unemployment report today from Statistics Canada. We are closing in on 7% unemployment in this country. Across the country, unemployment rate 6.8% now. And that is despite the fact that the economy created 51,000 jobs last month, which would usually be a pretty good number. The problem is the economy can pump out that many jobs, but population growth, i.e. immigration, is such that there are just so many more people looking for jobs that job creation can't keep up with the number of people looking for jobs. And get a load of this. 51,000 jobs created, 45,000 of them in the public sector. So 90% of all the jobs created last month were public sector jobs, not private sector jobs, government paid jobs. Now, a lot of that has to do with healthcare. A lot of the provinces are on hiring binges right now, trying to hire nurses and doctors and PSWs and other kinds of healthcare workers. We have 1.5 million Canadians are unemployed now. 1.5 million. And the number of unemployed people has increased 280,000 or 22% in just the last year. And the unemployed are unemployed longer. 1 in 5 who are unemployed now have been unemployed for at least 27 weeks. At least 27 weeks. So they've been out of work for at least 6 months. It's not good. It's not good at all. I'll just throw that out there. If you're looking for a job, not a good time to be looking for a job. Not a good time to be a government seeking re-election either with numbers like that. But let's go to Paul in Cambridge. Thanks for waiting, Paul. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Tom. Rob, how you doing? Hello.
Oh, Tom. Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Just a couple of things.
Hi, Tom. Go ahead.
Right. Okay, first, just a couple of things. Is that it's maybe a bad example, but I know if I buy a car or I bought a race car, I can't put a race car on a city street unless it has a certain requirement in it, and it's legally to drive on the street. So if I'm buying a rifle and I modify that rifle, and if it passes its legal requirements, then there should be an issue right there. How these rifles got in or became a point of sale should be another issue. Why we were allowing assault weapons, consider an AK-47 or an M16 to be allowed.
AK-47. An AK-47 is a prohibited weapon already and has been since 1977, sir.
77. But okay, so now someone's bought that prior to. All right, there's nothing you can do about that. But if there's weapons that can be modified beyond what they're supposed to be, that should be a contending issue right there. With regards to division of country, and I'm not a Trudeau defender, but the country has been divided many times with regard to a referendum about how Quebec should be treated, what special treatments they should have, and then we've gone to a referendum. And my last question is, how do you what's your perception over the week of all the topics that have gone in? Does public opinion really matter? Public outrage really matter? Because it just seems to be at point in times, and I really appreciate how your show platform gives everybody an avenue to voice concerns, vent, whatever you want to call it. But at least you give us an opportunity to explain how our opinions or how we feel. So that is my end for the day. Thank you very much for the platform, and I look forward to listening to your show more often and maybe participating more.
Yeah, I think we've moved on. Just to your a point on divisions within the country. I think the country is more divided than ever. We have moved well beyond two solitudes, say English and French, Upper Canada, Lower Canada. We have a government that has excelled at pitting one cohort of Canadians of one variety or the other against one another. We have the rich versus the poor. We have urban versus rural. Look at what is happening with religious division right now with Muslims and Jews and Sikhs and Hindus, let alone what is happening geographically. There was a poll out this week that showed the separatists are on the march in Quebec. The separatists are going to win a landslide victory in the next election in Quebec. Don't think separatism is dead in Quebec. They're going to try again. And look how they feel in the West right now, being governed by this Liberal government in Ottawa. Consider that, please, over the weekend. Glenn in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Glenn. Go ahead.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Glenn. Okay. I hear you just fine, Glenn. What's on your mind?
Well, first I'll make a comment about the last gentleman in the last hour. And it's simple. What's happened for the heritage guns where they used to disable the barrel so they couldn't be fired, so that they could be shown and so on, and now they're trying to collect them, take them away? Why not do that? Okay, that's done with. I'm calling because the main thing wrong in Canada can be summed up with three letters: GST. Because of the fact that it's charged on every level of right from raw material to reaching the stores. Get your numbers, people, to match it up to an item that's imported from another country and doesn't get any GST until it arrives in Canada. When it first came out, if I bought an item that cost $1 for materials, if I bought it in some place like China, after all of the duties and everything else, I could put it on sale for about $3 to $4. If it was made in Canada, it'd be closer to $15. Same item, just manufactured here where the GST is tacked on it. Get your people to number crunch that.
Okay. Well, we don't have many people around here. It's really only me and David. And I'll tell you what, grown men cry when I do math. But I do take your point. Thank you, Glenn in Calgary. Thanks for having your say. The hour is flying by already. Let's get into the weekend together here. It's hour number 2 of Talkback.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday free-for-all. Rick in Dartmouth. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Rob, there are three kinds of people. Those who are good at math and those who aren't.
I'm the third kind. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, look, as far as firearms are concerned, I fully support the gun owners. I don't own a gun, or what I have is an antique that was passed down, as some of the other people have from a grandfather of a grandfather. But my other point is unemployment and all of that stuff. It's basically the main premise of capitalism and free market is the law of supply and demand. And as you so eloquently said earlier, we have too many people. It's that simple. And this was not by mistake, in my view. It has led to the rise in prices. Earlier today on Todd Dino's show here in Nova Scotia, We were talking about the price of lumber, which is basically quadrupled in the last 5 years. Why is a 2x4 cost 4 or 5 times as much as it did in 2020? Nobody knows, but you can figure it out by looking around and seeing all the cranes in the air. We have, I don't know, maybe 30 cranes up in Halifax. My old neighborhood, there's 11.
Wow.
4 or 5 of the buildings will be 40. We're talking like a neighborhood that didn't have any high rises. Okay, it's just going to be, China. Anyway, that's the main point, that if you keep bringing people in, you're going to just keep having the same problems. It's going to get worse. And it's not racist. It's just an economic fact.
Sure. Yeah. No, you're making perfect sense. Thank you, Rick. Good to hear from you. Have a good weekend. I mean, I was reading through this unemployment report today. I mean, 1.5 million people unemployed in Canada, and StatsCan, it says half of them have not worked at all in the last year or have never worked in Canada. 1.5 million people, half have not worked at all in the last year, have never worked at all. Almost 47% of the unemployed in this country have not worked in the last year, have never worked at all. 663,000 people. And I mean, some of these unemployment rates in some of these cities, Windsor, 8.7%, Windsor, Ontario. Edmonton, 8.3%. Toronto, 8.1%. Calgary is 7.9%. Oshawa, 7.8%. 2 of the biggest cities in Alberta have some of the highest unemployment rates, 2 out of the top 5. Halifax, 5.1%. Now, I mean, I don't know. When I was growing up, if you told me like the unemployment rate would be 5% in Halifax and almost, well, whatever it is, 8% in Calgary, I'd say you're crazy. Crazy. And there's Quebec City in the great have-not province of Quebec, the worst of all the have-not provinces, of course. Quebec City, the lowest unemployment rate in the country of all the big cities at 4.5%. Make it make sense. Carl in Halifax. Carl, thanks for waiting. Go ahead, Carl.
Hey, Rob, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
All right. Yeah, so the border security thing.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm a dual citizen. I'm American and Canadian. And I used to be a snowbird before and during and short after my wife died on me. I raised 2 boys by myself. And I've been self-employed most of my life since I was 12 for the majority of my life. And so maybe some of these people, they're looking for work, man, start a business or something. But that's not why I called. The borders, listen, I was a snowbird, right? And I always drove across the border.
Yeah.
My goodness, and I always cross in Quebec because I have relatives close to the border in the eastern townships and so on. And so I'm telling you, over the years, I could have smuggled so much stuff into this country. It's insane. And I have. I mean, I brought family shotguns and everything. They don't search anything. And then recently, what happened to me in 2016, I had a 2-story house right on the ocean north of Daytona Beach. I lived in that house for 11 years. My house got destroyed by a hurricane. I lost 3 vehicles, everything. And I was looking for an excuse to come back to Canada and say hello to friends and family I hadn't seen in 20 years because I was traveling all over the continent and surfing and everywhere doing our business, my sons and I. Anyway, the whole point is this. When I came across the border, I lost my house November 1st, 2016.
Okay.
And so I said, that's it. I'm going to go back and so that's what I did. So what I did, because my vehicles were destroyed, I was in California at the time, and I'm watching this on TV. I'm like, my house is going to be destroyed. I knew it would. So, and sure enough, it was. So I salvaged what I could. I packed 2 huge duffel bags, that weighed 100 pounds each. And when you get on, and I took a bus all the way to Montreal and all the way to Seven Islands on the North Shore of Quebec, When I got to the border, and this was Christmas time, it was like a couple days before New Year's Eve, I crossed the border.
I need you to get to the kind of the final chapter here because
I could have had anything in those bags.
Okay.
I had 200-pound duffel bags. That could have been 100 pounds of C4. It could have been anything. Cocaine or they didn't
Whatever,
search my bags, nothing. I waltzed right across the border, man, on a bus during the holidays. Can you believe that? I mean, come on. So something's got to change. They didn't even look in my bags or anything.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. They're promising some action on that, helicopters and drones and more staff and redeploying staff. We'll see if any of it comes to fruition. Thank you for your call, Carl. Good to hear from you. Glad you're well.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Linda in Kitchener, you're on the Friday Free for All Talkback. What's on your mind?
Well, I started to call as soon as the gentleman speaking about the GST spoke, and I've been on hold and not able to hear if anyone has corrected him yet. The GST, any business in Canada, they pay GST on their inputs, raw materials, but they get 100% input tax credit back. So there is no GST on top of the GST. I am a chartered accountant. There's no GST on top of the GST. The total GST paid on a good imported is the same as the GST paid on a good manufactured here in Canada.
All right.
I also wanted to speak about the border. And there was someone who was complaining about how he was able to smuggle things into Canada. But really what we're talking about here is Trump wanting Canada to control people exiting Canada and goods exiting Canada. But for every person that exits Canada, that same person is entering the U.S. So the U.S. government is not able to control who is entering their country and what they're bringing with them. And now Trump wants Canada and the U.S. government has 10 times the population and 32 times the national defense budget. And yet Trump wants Canada to protect the U.S. borders. And I'm just unbelievably shocked that no one is saying this, pointing this
That's been
out.
raised. It's been raised. You're saying nobody's saying that. It's been raised many times this week on this show, Linda, with all due respect. Yeah, callers have pointed that out multiple times.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm
right.
shocked that Trudeau would allow our taxes to be paid to defend the U.S. border.
Okay, well, we have heard from the new border czar that he considers the northern border to be a national security concern for the United States. That it's far too easy for people to come into Canada and then attempt to sneak into the United States with the intent of doing harm to the United States.
Then they need to beef up their defense of their border and make sure they can control who is entering.
Right. And one of their issues is that they think it's too easy for these people to come from other countries and get into this country in the first place. Do you think that's a legitimate concern?
Border. So beefing up our border going into the States isn't the issue.
No.
We need to control who's coming into our country from other countries.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Linda. Got you in there before the news. The latest breaking news coming up next. And then we're in the home stretch of the Friday Free for All Talkback. Coming up on News Radio.
68-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It is the Friday Free for All Talkback hour. Certainly a lot of calls on the gun control measures announced yesterday and more firearms being added to that ban list. I just wonder how much impact these measures announced yesterday and previously really will have on the prevalence of gun crime in Canada. Okay? Let me just run some stats by you. I'll just take a minute or two here. The last time there was a big report on gun crime in Canada, it was released about a year ago, 11 months ago. It was from Statistics Canada. It was called Firearms and Violent Crime in Canada 2022. Came out in January of this year. Okay? It said, and it's for 2022, remember, it said there were 14,000 firearms-related violent crimes in Canada reported to the police, and that was up 10% from the year before. It was up 10% from the year before. And that was despite the government's announcement of this ban of 1,500 so-called assault-style firearms, and now the Liberals say they're going to add another 324 firearms to that list and probably add more firearms to that list next year. And yet the Liberals say all of this is being done to keep us safe. Okay? But gun crimes went up, not down. Armed robberies went up by 24%. Murders with guns went up by 6%. So what does that say, honestly, about how effective these policies really are? The number of gun crimes that year, which is the last year that there is data publicly available, the number of gun crimes, worst year on record. Worst year ever. Now, during the Harper years, the Harper government was always accused of being in the back pocket of the gun lobby. But during the Harper years, gun crime went down 30%. Gun crime went down 30%. Between 2009 and 2013, firearms-related crime in Canada, according to the government's own figures, hit a low in 2013. Prime Minister Harper had been Prime Minister for 7 years at that point. And since Trudeau has come to office, firearms-related crimes are up 120%. And those are the government's own figures, not mine. So here comes the same government and says, well, we already banned 1,500 of these so-called assault-style firearms. Now we're going to ban 324 more, maybe more next year. I would ask you, where's the evidence any of this is having any impact on the rates of gun crime at all? Set aside the fact that we're going to take some of these guns, give them to the Ukrainians to help the Ukrainians fight the Russians. I don't know. I'll just throw it out there. 1-833-668-2577. It's the Friday free-for-all. You don't have to talk about that topic. You can talk about whatever's on your mind. Bruce in Calgary. Thanks for waiting, Bruce. Go ahead. One last rant from me for the week. Hi, Bruce. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the tariffs.
Tariffs, sure.
And Donald Trump's impetus to put in the tariffs. I think part of it is he is trying to send a message to Canadians about liberal policies that don't align with U.S. values. Okay. And I think he's doing that through tariffs. So, for example, even if you look at the gun control policy, that's going to hurt U.S. business. That sell those guns are U.S. businesses that operate in Canada. You look at, the cap that he wants to put on carbon. We export the majority of our oil to the U.S. That could shut in oil into Canada and prevent the U.S. from being able to access more oil. And that's a national threat to the U.S. So if I look at it, I'm thinking, one of your panel hosts this morning talked about, well, if Trudeau can come away and avoid those tariffs, he may spark a little more life. If I'm looking at it from the perspective of U.S. national security, liberal policies are affecting that. Open borders, immigration, etc. I don't want to give Trudeau any leeway.
Okay.
So my thinking is I'm thinking he's going to put those tariffs in regardless. I mean, there's no love lost between the two of them.
Of course not. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting point of view. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Good to hear from you. Sarah, up next on the Friday Free for All Talkback. You're on the air, Sarah. What's on your mind?
Hi, Rob. Thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate your show.
Thank you.
I was gifted a gun years ago by a man that was a father figure to me, and it's been on my wall ever since. I went and got my gun license just so that I could have it. So that part really does suck. I'm not looking forward to it. Anyways, long and short of it, I just wanted to say you have the patience of Job, because some of these callers that can't get a word in edgewise and stutter and stammer through amuses the living snot out of me. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say, love. Have a great day.
Well.
Bye-bye.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, I listen to everybody. I try to get everybody's opinion, no matter their perspective. I can't say I'm going to agree with everyone or even understand everyone's point of view. Most of the time, that's more on me than the caller. Let's go to Bill, is calling from Calgary. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Rob. How you doing? Rob, you there?
I'm good, Bill. Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry. Yeah, it's been quite a week, hasn't it? We've had the GST rebate that nobody gives a damn about, and got a new non-confidence motion being debated. Now we've got 350 extra firearms being put on a list that's never got one rifle or gun turned in. I'm all worried now, Rob, because I might have to take my 350-year-old flintlocks off the wall and turn them into the government pretty quick anyway, I think. And I'm going to go out and buy myself one of those airsoft AR-15 replica guns that fires, 1,000 plastic pellets a minute, sort of a thing. It's just crazy, Rob. It's absolutely crazy. We need an election, my friend. We need it sooner than later. Thanks, Rob. You have a good weekend.
Well, okay. Yeah, you too, Bill. Thank you. We'll be right back. A few more calls, a few more topics, whatever's on your mind. It's a Friday free-for-all. We're pretty easy around here on Fridays. Give us a call, 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is in the final couple of innings here on the Friday free-for-all Talkback hour. But time to take your calls. We wind things down here. Wayne in Cambridge. Thanks for calling. Wayne, you're up next. What's up?
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Wayne. Thank you. Go ahead.
This is with regards to the gun control. Now, I can understand people saying, yes, they have their rights to have these type of weapons. I lived in New Zealand for about 25 years. And I was there in Auckland, March of 2019, where those dozens of men, women, and children were massacred at those two mosques.
Terrible. Yeah.
So when the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, came on television, she basically said this one thing. The AR and the AK style of weapons, they are not meant for hunting. They're not meant for target practice. They are made for one thing and one thing only, and that is whatever they hit, they destroy. So when you have these individuals, I can appreciate their rights. Yes, they want the freedom to have their weapons, but if they can tell me what they are going to be doing with these kinds of weapons, I would love to know. Within 2 weeks from that massacre, it was a unanimous decision brought forth even by the opposition. Those type of weapons, any type of military weapons, were banned, and they did the buyback. And the entire parliament said, yes, this is absolutely insane. People do not need these kind of weapons. And, if you can have any callers explain.
Well, they have explained it. And this is, and again, I have mentioned this. I am not a gun owner. I've never owned guns. I don't go hunting. I know very little about guns. So this is why I like to talk about these topics. What they have said is, you take that weapon, that firearm that you mentioned. They look scary, okay, but they operate exactly the same way as a hunting rifle. Semi-automatic, no more than 5 bullets, whatever. It's all about the style of the weapon, but the operation of the firearm itself is exactly the same as many traditional hunting rifles. That's how it's been explained to me, sir.
Well,
and that these decisions
said,
they're being motivated by emotion, and they're not really evidence-based.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, everybody has.
I mean, for example, Wayne, because you've introduced kind of the counter opinion, which is very rare, and I really appreciate you doing this. I mean, we had the terrible mass shootings in Portapique, Nova Scotia. After that, the government banned 1,500 of these so-called assault-style firearms. That's their definition of assault-style firearms.
Yes.
And yet, there's no evidence that it has had any impact on the rates of gun crime at all.
No, that's true. And in saying that, how many of these guns are still being able to get into Canada?
Well, isn't this it? It was all over social media this week. One man killed, another man wounded in Brampton. You can see the video. Two people drive up, they hop out, and they open fire with these weapons, and they kill a guy in Brampton. Targeted attack. Do you think that those people are going to register their weapons, let alone participate in any kind of gun buyback program?
Oh, of course not. That's not going to happen. It is just getting to the point that, give it time, Canada is going to be becoming another version of the United States with regards to guns. I mean, the States, they have more weapons than people.
Well, we have lots of guns in Canada right now, sir.
Oh, that is absolutely true. But it's,
the estimate is there are between 7 and 10 million firearms in Canada.
Oh, I can believe it. I can believe it. But as
I grew up in a town. I was once told, it's not part of my upbringing. I was told in the town that I grew up in Nova Scotia, there were probably more guns than people. And yet we've never had any problems like this.
I've never had a weapon. I have no desire to have a weapon. But it was just that, listening to the people, yes, I can understand what they're talking about, their rights and freedoms. But when I was over there in New Zealand, and then all of a sudden, all these bells and whistles and emergencies come on, and then they come on TV, and 54 men, women, and children.
I understand that, sir. It was the exact same in Canada when Portapique was unfolding. It was a terrible situation. And that man the man who perpetrated that, Gabriel Wortman, he had those guns. He smuggled them all in from the United States. He never had a gun license. He never obtained one firearm illegally. The man was a complete sociopath, nut bar.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think there's any evidence that he would have ever complied with any kind of gun law in Canada, because he flouted every gun law in Canada and perpetrated the worst mass shooting in Canadian history.
Oh, definitely.
This is why we have to look. We can't have public policy that's just driven by pure emotion.
True. Yep, I can appreciate what you're saying. I suppose for me, yes,
okay.
It is emotional for me when you hear about these people that are just going about their business, and
sure,
a nut job from Australia decides to open up with an AR-15, and the worst part was he was recording it on Facebook Live while he was doing it.
Oh, I know. I remember that. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you for your call.
Much.
I appreciate it, Wayne. Yeah. It's very much the minority opinion, certainly to callers on this show. Thank you. We'll be right back. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Right back to the phones on a Friday Free for All Talkback. Terry in Alberta. Hello, Terry.
Hello. Hey,
Hi, Terry.
Rob. Just really quickly, this is not gun control. This is gun confiscation in Canada.
Right.
The the stats that you revealed are very interesting a minute ago regarding gun crimes in Canada in 22. The one thing that you maybe don't have access to is what percentage of those crimes are actually committed by gun owners that are law-abiding. I'm not putting you on the spot here, but
no, it doesn't say. I read the whole report, sir. It doesn't say. I read the whole report. It measures are gun crimes reported to police. Now, a bad guy shooting another bad guy might not even be reported to the police.
You're right there. And the other thing that I might say is that the Second Amendment in the U.S., I think, was set up to basically protect people from government. And the way things are going now, this is not going to stop, Rob. Every year, there's going to be more and more chiseled away at this mountain until it finally collapses. And people have to pay attention to the control that government is imposing on the public at large. And it's not only guns, it's various other things that are going on in this country. We're spiraling into an abyss, which is not good. We used to be a great nation, but the only difference, I call it, the difference between us and Somalia is the spelling of the name.
Okay, well, on that happy note, I think we're just going to wrap it up there for today. Thank you, Terry. I would just pay attention to kind of the calendar. I mean, the amnesty on a lot of these firearms lasts until the 30th of October of next year, of 2025. The election is supposed to be held, a week before that? Around there, about a week, maybe 2 weeks before that. So whether this actually takes place, this full-fledged gun buyback of these firearms, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. That's not going to prevent, I would say, and maybe I'll close on this, not going to prevent the Liberals from probably spending a whole lot of money on it between now and then. That's it for us for this week. We are back on Monday with more topics, more phone calls, and always the latest breaking news. That's coming up next. I'm Rob Snow with David Smith. Have a great weekend. This is News Radio.